Welcome back to the journey into prehistory, where ancient breaths still echo through the layers of time. Today, we will step together into a very special moment, the moment just before Tyrannosaurus Rex begins its hunt. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a few things. Have you ever wondered what happens in those silent seconds before a supreme predator begins its pursuit? How a T.rex, seemingly clumsy and heavy, could silently approach its prey without giving itself away? And did you know that sometimes the world around it senses its presence even before it arrives? If you're curious, let your body relax, gently close your eyes, and let me take you back 66 million years to a late afternoon in the Cretaceous. The wind moves through the Araucaria branches, carrying a faint resin scent. The last sunlight of the day falls in thin golden streaks, piercing through drifting veils of mist above the ground. The ancient North American forest seems quiet, but in truth it is trembling, as if all of nature is holding its breath. Not because of the wind, not because of an earthquake, but because the ruler of this land has stepped out of the shadows. A very small sound, almost impossible to hear. The soft press of earth, the faint brushing of ferns. The T.rex is coming. It does not roar. It does not charge. It does not flaunt its strength. It moves silently, like a colossal spirit attuned to the heartbeat of the entire forest. Its golden eyes sweep across every dark corner, every smallest movement of herbivores like Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, and Pachycephalosaurus. With a single breath, it can sense where fresh tracks lie, where lingering warmth marks the passage of prey. And those creatures, though they have not yet seen it, have begun to feel something unsettling seep into their blood. The air shifts. The wind slows. The herbivores lift their heads all at once, as if driven by a primal instinct for survival. But for the T.rex, this is only the beginning. It has not chosen a target, has not accelerated, has not attacked. This is only the preparation, the moment when all its senses open and merge with the world, the moment when the entire forest becomes a living map guiding the perfect predator. The sunset is fading. Darkness is seeping into every breath. And at this very moment, the hunt of Tyrannosaurus Rex is about to begin. The late afternoon of the Cretaceous was slowly drawing to a close. The sky turned amber, the last rays of sunlight slanting through a thin layer of mist, bathing the ancient Araucaria forest in a shimmering golden hue like a faraway dream. This was the land of ancient Laramidia, where vast valleys, dense marshlands, and endless coniferous forests stretched all the way to the horizon. Though it was only a peaceful moment in the world of 66 million years ago, that silence was becoming odd. Not because the wind had stopped blowing, not because the sun was about to set, but because deep beneath the earth, tiny vibrations were whispering something. The ground did not shake sharply like in an earthquake, but trembled very softly like the heartbeat of a colossal creature walking slowly through time. Tyrannosaurus Rex emerged from between trunks, as tall as the stone pillars of an ancient temple. It did not roar, did not run, did not flaunt itself. The T.rex walked like a silent storm. Its body was a masterpiece of evolution, over 12 meters long, weighing between 7–9 tons. Each step carrying enough force to lightly crack the soil, teeth up to 30 centimeters long. A bite force many times stronger than a lion or a shark. But what made the forest tremble was not its size. It was the way it moved. The T.rex was not heavy-footed. On the contrary, it walked with soft, controlled strides, its joints absorbing shock perfectly, sending almost no sound outward. The thin coat of protofeathers along its back and neck let it feel the slightest changes in the wind, an extraordinary biological sensor. At this moment, The T-rex was listening to the forest with its entire body. A northbound breeze carrying the scent of an Edmontosaurus herd, the vibration of ferns revealing that prey had recently passed, the cooling air marking the approach of night, and the rising humidity hinting that the western swamp was an ideal gathering place for herbivores. It was not only the T-rex sensing the forest sensed its presence too. Ancient birds like Avisaurus burst out of the treetops, calling alarmingly. A herd of Pachycephalosaurus raised their heads in unison, eyes alert. The Edmontosaurus froze, ears tilted toward the wind, their hearing working overtime. This world had evolved for millions of years to recognize the signs of death, and at this moment, that sign stood in the forest, silent, like spreading darkness. Modern science shows that the T-rex had a highly developed sense of smell, with an enlarged olfactory region, sensitivity to low-frequency sounds, allowing it to detect ground vibrations, forward-facing eyes giving it stereoscopic vision, one of the largest brains among theropods, capable of strategic hunting. That is why this moment was not the moment it hunted. It was the moment it analyzed. The T-rex stopped, did not move. Its 9-ton body stood still like a living monolith. It tilted its head slightly, only a few degrees, but enough to change the direction of the wind, carrying scents into its long, wide nostrils. Its warm breath drifted out, forming a thin mist merging with the evening fog. It was determining how far the Edmontosaurus herd was, whether any young had strayed from the group, if a mature Triceratops was guarding the area, whether the wind direction favored its approach, if the terrain had obstacles that might reveal its presence. This was the mapping stage, the most crucial behavior before the hunt. The sky slowly turned violet. The final rays of sunlight fell on the T-rex's back, outlining it with a metallic glow. The scent of resin, damp earth, and prey grew stronger. The entire forest now seemed to fall into absolute stillness, as if nature understood that the balance between life, death, creation, and destruction was on the brink of being broken. But the T-rex remained patient. It took one step, then another, slow yet steady, moving toward the marshland. Along the way, each fern brushed softly against its leg. The earth beneath its feet compressed, gave way, then rose again. Nothing could be rushed at this moment. A perfect hunt required the calm of a storm. A faint sound echoed, thud, very soft, but clear enough to the ears of a T-rex. It was the footsteps of a young Edmontosaurus straying from the herd. It froze instantly, shifted its weight forward. Its golden eyes narrowed, adjusting to the dim light. Its breath deepened like wind slipping through a narrow ravine, not from excitement, but because this was the moment it shifted from observation to targeting. The Edmontosaurus herd was gathering at the edge of the swamp, and within that herd was a perfect target, smaller, slower, separated, easy to startle. A scientific truth. The T-rex did not choose the strong, it chose the weak, the young, or the old. That was the energy-efficient instinct of all large predators. The air grew heavy. Insects stopped flying. The wind slowed. The Edmontosaurus switched from feeding to lifting their heads. And the T-rex shifted its body slightly, lifting its right foot. This was the moment when the entire forest seemed to hold its breath. Just a little more. Just a little more. The hunt was about to begin. The T-rex was not a mindless glutton. It did not attack anything that moved. It chose its prey, and chose very carefully. Fossil bite mark studies show that T-rex had particular preferences. Edmontosaurus, massive herbivores, full of meat, easily panicked. They traveled in large herds, but sometimes a young or old individual strayed a perfect opportunity. Triceratops, a large but high-risk target. The T-rex would only attack if the prey was injured, or stuck in mud, or a young individual whose horns had not fully developed. Ankylosaurus, almost ironclad. The T-rex rarely hunted them. and less desperate. Fossils show bite marks on legs or less armored areas, proof that it could try, but they were far from ideal prey. Carrion, an important food source, though a super predator. The T.rex would readily eat carrion if it found some never-wasting easy energy. But today, what it needed was fresh meat, and the ideal target was a young Edmontosaurus that had strayed from the herd. This T.rex had not eaten for 2 days. For an 8-9-ton animal, 2 days of hunger was not death, but it did cause a slight increase in heart rate, a gradual decline in energy reserves, the muscles to tighten, and its predatory brain to become sharper than ever. Hunger made its breath deeper, hotter. Every time its jaws opened, warm air drifted into the evening mist, forming thin vapor trails like smoke. But strangely, the hungrier it was, the quieter it became. No panic, no wild charges through the forest. On the contrary, it moved so slowly it was hard to believe, like a warrior who knew hunger was merely a reminder, not a command. The T.rex was not fast like Velociraptor, not agile like Deinonychus, not cooperative like the pack-hunting Utahraptor. Its greatest weapon was not just its jaws, it was absolute patience. This T.rex had been following the Edmontosaurus herd since dawn. It kept a careful distance, far enough not to be detected, but close enough to observe the behavior of every individual in the herd. Science calls this shadow tracking, tracking from the dark, a behavior seen in strategic predators. For many hours, it did not attempt an attack. It simply waited for a young one to fall behind, waited for a tired one to slow down, waited for the moment the wind would shift, carrying the scent of prey exactly where it wanted it. A hungry creature often loses patience, but not the T.rex. It stood still for so long that even the moss on nearby rocks seemed to stop trembling in fear. The thin proto-feathers on its neck, so fine they were barely visible, quivered gently in the breeze. Its golden eyes pierced the shadows like twin pools, reflecting the sunset. Though its stomach tightened, though the scent of the Edmontosaurus herd grew stronger, it did not move. Then what it had waited for all afternoon finally happened. A young Edmontosaurus, about 3 years old, was a little slower than the herd. It followed the others by several dozen meters, stopping to feed on ferns, unaware that every other individual had turned in a different direction. The T.rex noticed this before the young one realized it was alone. And even though excitement surged deep within its massive frame, the T.rex did not charge immediately. Hunger did not blind it. Hunger sharpened it. Its breath slowed. The muscles in its legs tightened in preparation. Its tail lowered, providing perfect balance. Its golden eyes did not leave the prey. A tiny movement, almost imperceptible, ran down the length of the T.rex's spine. Not from fear, but as a signal, the shift from patience to action. The wind changed. The scent of the young one grew stronger, clearer. The Edmontosaurus herd in the distance still sensed nothing amiss. The young one kept its head down, grazing, and it did not know that only a few 100 meters away, hidden in the darkness, a hungry yet perfectly patient predator was preparing to end its existence. The T.rex lifted its foot, slowly but surely. Every muscle fiber in its body loosened, readying for the first explosive stride. Hunger was no longer a problem. It had transformed into fuel controlled by the instincts of a super predator. The world around seemed dead silent. All of nature held its breath, because, in the next moment, the hunt would begin. The sun had completely slipped behind the distant mountain ranges. The final light remained only as a faint violet band along the horizon, casting long diagonal shadows across the Araucaria forest. In that dim glow, the T.rex suddenly stopped, not because of a loud sound, not because of any clear movement, but because an exquisitely fragile signal of life had just brushed across the olfactory receptors inside its nasal cavity. A gentle breeze drifted back from the swamp. In it was something sweet and fresh, the distinctive scent of a young Edmontosaurus, warm body heat, soft juvenile skin, and the moist plant residue left on the ferns they usually fed on. To humans, such differences would be invisible. To a T.rex, they were as clear as color. The T.rex tilted its head slightly, its large nostrils widening. The thin mucus lining inside its nasal passage activated thousands of olfactory receptors, far stronger than those of eagles, surpassing even wolves and modern bears. From just a single breath of wind, it already knew. Wind direction southwest. Scent concentration, the youngster was close. Crushed plant scent, it was eating or had just eaten. No alarm pheromones, it had no idea danger was near. Its nearly 9-ton body lowered slightly. Its head dipped. Its tail sank closer to the ground for stability. This was no longer the posture of a creature simply walking. This was the posture of one preparing to become a shadow. The T.rex moved slower. One step, and then it stopped, listening. The forest grew so quiet that even the sound of an insect brushing against a leaf could be heard. The ferns at its feet tilted faintly, and the soft soil compressed again under its weight. Its eyes, large and forward-facing, offered stereoscopic vision, a rare trait among dinosaurs. It saw a form moving, smaller than the adults, head down, feeding, unaware. The young Edmontosaurus. Distance, about 150 meters. The fading light was no problem. T.rex could clearly distinguish bright and dark patches, recognizing the outline of a body separated from the forest backdrop. It took another step. Strangely, despite weighing 9 tons, its steps were unbelievably soft. Its massive network of tendons and muscles absorbed impact efficiently, reducing vibrations through the ground. One of the main reasons many herbivores never sensed it until it was too late. The T.rex did not rush. It knew 150 meters was still too far to attack. Charging from that distance would create enough noise for the entire herd to notice and flee, taking the young one with them. So it chose the hunting style of a silent assassin. Move alongside large tree trunks to hide its enormous body. Only advance when the prey lowers its head to feed deers, because its vision weakens and leaves rustle louder then. Freeze entirely when the youngster lifts its head, becoming motionless like a living statue. Shift more weight onto its hips and tail to reduce noise transmitted through the ground. Monitor the wind every second, since a single shift could ruin the plan. Hunger tightened inside its belly, but it did not cloud its mind. Any lesser animal would panic, but not the T.rex. It knew a failed strike meant enormous energy loss, something a creature weighing nearly 9 tons could not afford. So it waited, lowering its head further, moving into thicker fern cover, where mud and decaying leaves disguised its scent. Distance dropped to 120 meters, then 100, then 80. Not a sound. The young Edmontosaurus suddenly paused. It lifted its head, ears pricked, nostrils flaring as it tried to catch something riding the wind. The T.rex froze instantly, not even blinking. The wind remained favorable, blowing from the youngster toward the T.rex, not the reverse. So the juvenile detected no scent, but its instincts still sensed something unusual. 1 second, 2, 3. It lowered its head again. The T.rex advanced slow, as the sun sinking behind the mountains. When the distance shrank to just 60 meters, the T.rex stopped one final time. This was the threshold. Beyond 60 meters, stalking. Within 60 meters, preparing to strike. Its golden eyes focused on the prey's thigh and hip, the best targets for crippling a victim. It analyzed the terrain. Soft ground ahead, good traction. Muddy patch to the right, the youngster could slip. A fallen log to the left, a natural barrier if the prey panicked and fled that way. The wind still held. The darkness masked its outline. The youngster remained completely unaware. The T.rex prepared itself, muscles tightening, tail bracing, jaws parting slightly to draw deeper breaths. It was no longer merely a stalker. It was becoming an attacker. The entire forest seemed to hold its breath, and as the darkness thickened, The T-Rex stood poised on the edge of the hunt's explosive beginning. The distance is now only 60 meters. This is the fragile boundary between darkness and eruption. T-Rex remains motionless for a few more seconds. It flares its nostrils, drawing in a deep breath filled with the scent of the juvenile. Its heartbeat rises slightly, not from nervousness, but because its body is preparing to unleash tons of muscle for the single moment that will determine the survival of both creatures. The young Edmontosaurus lifts its head again. It senses something, a faint breeze carrying an unfamiliar scent. T-Rex knows that moment when the prey begins to feel doubt is the moment to act. No roar, no warning, not a sound. T-Rex explodes in silence. Its massive leg muscles tighten, hurling the full weight of its body forward. Its tail sweeps lightly, not for balance, but to add a twist of power to the first leap. In the twilight gloom of the forest, it launches like a colossal arrow. Science tells us T-Rex could reach 27-32 kilometers per hour. And most importantly, it had incredible acceleration in the first few seconds. In the first 2 seconds, it covers 20 meters. Each stride, nearly 4-5 meters long. Soil and debris fly up. But the sound is muffled by the thick layer of decaying leaves. The juvenile Edmontosaurus hears rustling leaves, then the compressed thud of earth behind it. It turns its head, and it sees 2 blazing yellow eyes charging toward it like twin fires in the night. Its survival reflex triggers instantly. The youngster bolts upward in panic, attempting to sprint toward the herd, but it's too late. T-Rex does not run straight at its prey. It angles left, an intelligent tactic analyzed by paleontologists through fossilized trackways. The reason: angling allows it to target the hip, the easiest spot to injure. Avoids head crests or horns in species that have them. Reduces the chance of the prey making a sudden directional change. Saves energy. The juvenile Edmontosaurus tries to veer right, but that only guides it directly into the strike zone of the T-Rex. The distance shrinks to 15 meters, 10 meters, 5 meters. No roar, no wasted motion, only the sound of earth bursting beneath each step and wind slicing between its teeth. T-Rex opens its jaws. Its mouth can gape up to 80 degrees wider than most modern predators. More than 60 blade-like teeth, each with serrated edges like a butcher's knife, built to pierce, tear, crush. In a fraction of a millisecond, it snaps its jaws shut. Crack. The sound doesn't resemble breaking bone. It is the sound of stone being pulverized under a massive grinding wheel. The bite force of T-Rex, 6-8 tons of pressure, 3 times stronger than a great white shark. Its jaws clamp directly into the juvenile's hip, slicing through skin, bone, and muscle in a deep, resonant thud. The young Edmontosaurus screams a sound choked by overwhelming pain and by the fact that T-Rex is dragging it off the ground. The youngster kicks, thrashes its tail, scrapes the soil. Its eyes are wide, trembling with the primal urge to live. But T-Rex will not let go. It jerks its head to the left. A classic T-Rex movement used to tear flesh and shatter joints. Each violent tug causes more muscle to rip, more bone to crack, the spine to twist. This is not a balanced fight. This is overwhelming, absolute power. The distant Edmontosaurus herd begins to scream, fleeing toward the swamp in a shaking stampede. But T-Rex doesn't care. It has chosen this prey, and once it chooses, it does not change its mind. As the youngster weakens, its head droops toward the ground, its legs trembling. T-Rex lifts it slightly, just a few dozen centimeters, and slams it hard onto the earth. This slam breaks more joints, stuns the prey, makes it unable to run again. In the natural world, this is common behavior in big cats and wolves, and T-Rex does the same, only with exponentially greater force. The juvenile lies still. Its legs quiver faintly. Its breaths are broken and fading. T-rex steps forward, places its massive foot on the youngster's back, each toe like a stone hammer, and ends it with a bite to the neck. A crisp, cracking snap. The spine breaks. The hunt ends faster than that of many modern predators. T-rex straightens its posture. It breathes deeply. Its chest rises and falls as its heartbeat stabilizes. It has succeeded. The forest, after minutes of chaos, returns to silence. But this silence is different. It is the silence left behind after death has passed through. The wind carries the scent of fresh blood and warm flesh, a signal to all other predators that this place belongs to T-rex. It lowers its head and tears off the first chunk of meat. Heat still rises from the juvenile's body. The feast begins. The chaos of the hunt had faded. The distant Edmontosaurus herd was still scattering in the purple mist of dusk, their hissing and pounding footsteps growing quieter, mixing with the wind. Only the T-rex remained, breathing slow and deep, its massive form standing out against the forest that was sinking rapidly into darkness. Around it, the ground still trembled faintly, partly because of its immense weight, partly because nature itself shuddered before the victory of the apex ruler. 1. The moment after the prey collapses, the young Edmontosaurus lay motionless, its body softening by the minute. Hot blood seeped into the damp soil, creating a thick metallic scent, the kind that scavengers across the region could easily detect. But for now, none dared approach. The T-rex stood beside the carcass, without roaring, without displaying its strength. Its silence alone was enough to send a clear message. This land is mine. This kill is mine. All others, stay away. 2. How T-rex begins its meal. Unlike any modern predator, T-rex does not immediately eat the softest parts. It does not tear small pieces like lions or leopards. It follows its own method, a method perfected by millions of years of evolution. Step 1. Rip the thick outer flesh. The T-rex lowers its head and uses its long blade-like incisors and canines to carve a large opening along the juvenile's hip. The sound is like thick hide being torn apart, mixed with the rushing of blood spilling out. Fossil studies show T-rex often began feeding from the belly or hip where the most meat was available and easiest to access. Step 2. Use crushing jaws to tear forcefully. It takes a massive bite, a truly enormous one, and pulls upward with force. Each pull relies on its body weight, its neck strength, and its crushing bite force. The chunk of flesh torn free can weigh several tens of kilograms. No living creature on Earth today can tear meat in this way. Step 3. Swallow whole. No chewing. T-rex barely chews. It swallows huge pieces of flesh, letting the stomach, a chamber of incredibly strong acids, continue the breakdown. The sound of its swallowing echoes heavily, like stones rolling inside the belly of a monster. 3. When nature begins to watch, as T-rex feeds, life around it begins to shift. From afar, a few Raptors, small predator scavengers swift as foxes, peek out from behind the ferns. They smell the blood, the warm flesh, and the scent of opportunity, but they dare not come closer, not while the giant still stands there. Another predator, Dakotaraptor, appears at the forest edge. It is larger and far more dangerous than Achiroraptor, armed with sickle-shaped claws and fierce resolve, but even it remains in the shadows, watching. Every species understands this rule. T-rex eats first. Others eat later if anything remains. 4. The vigilance of T-rex, never careless. Even while eating, T-rex never ceases to observe. Every few minutes, it will lift its head, turn slightly to either side, draw a deep breath through its nostrils, listen to the rustling leaves, not because it fears losing its kill, but because T-rex Rex is a predator, yet it still has potential threats, not direct threats. None can challenge a fully grown T-Rex head-on, but another T-Rex might come to steal the carcass. An adult male triceratops might charge in defense of its herd. A pack of Dakotaraptors might harass from a distance. Evolution created a dominant ruler, but never allowed it to lower its guard. Each time it looks up, the T-Rex stands still for several seconds, its golden eyes sweeping across the darkness like two faint torches. 5. The extended meal and nature's cruelty. After about the first 10 minutes, the belly and hip of the juvenile are nearly hollowed out. The T-Rex moves to the front where the meat is thinner but rich in muscle. A loud crack echoes. It has just snapped one of the youngster's ribs, bones breaking under the bite of a T-Rex do not sound like ordinary fractures. They ring out like a coconut shell cleaved cleanly by an axe. The scent of hot blood spreads farther. More scavengers begin to gather, but all keep their distance. None dares approach within 30 meters. 6. When the forest is swallowed by night, darkness pours in quickly, engulfing the Araucaria forest, thickening the air with chill. A thin crescent moon rises, casting a silver streak across the T-Rex's back. Its shadow stretches long, like a moving ridge of living stone, and in that darkness, the ancient crows, the night birds, the insects, all fall silent, for they know the planet's greatest predator is feeding, and until it leaves, none dare make a sound. 7. When the meal ends and its territorial ritual begins, at last, when it is full, so full that its belly bulges, the T-Rex lifts its head, blood still clinging to the corners of its mouth. It stands tall, draws in a long breath, then circles the carcass once, simply to mark that its claim still stands. A few deep, low rumbles slip from its throat, not loud roars but warning tones. Dakotaraptor backs away further. Achiroraptor vanishes into the brush. The feast is over, but the dominance endures. When the T-Rex left the area, the forest still carried its imprint. The ground sagged where its massive footsteps had pressed. The lingering warmth on the soil rose through the mist like drifting ribbons of vapor. The smell of blood and hot flesh remained strong, sliding with the wind and spreading into the surrounding valleys. Even though the ruler's silhouette had vanished behind the towering Araucaria trunks, not a single creature approached right away. Nature was still hesitant, like when a storm has just passed. The clouds have moved on, yet the thunder still echoes somewhere in the memory of the land and sky. The hunting ground lay silent, like a cradle abandoned in the middle of the forest. The thin crescent moon shone on the soft body of the young Edmontosaurus, creating a pale pool of light against the dark earth. No footsteps, no beating wings, no cries of scavengers competing for the corpse, only the wind and the scent of blood, a smell that is always both an invitation and a warning. The scavengers knew the rule well. The T-Rex may have left, but it could return at any moment. A faint rustle sounded from the edge of the forest. Then, a small, sharp head, with eyes shining like two black pearls, emerged from a clump of ferns. Achiroraptor, a small dromaeosaur, quick, cunning, and reckless. It hesitated in the darkness. Its head tilted slightly, its eyes narrowed as it inspected the still steaming Edmontosaurus carcass. Achiroraptors always arrived first at a feast of the dead, not because they were brave, but because they were light, and more importantly, they were fast enough to flee if the T-Rex returned. After a few seconds of hesitation, it stepped out from the shadows very lightly, as if not touching the ground at all. It moved close to the torn belly, carefully sniffing the rising warmth. Suddenly, it jerked its head back, not out of fear, but because it realized the meat was still too hot, a sign that the T-Rex had eaten not long ago. It stepped back, eyes never leaving the darkness behind it. The wind carried a heavier rustling sound. Achororaptor instantly leapt aside. From between the trees, a much larger shadow stepped out, a body taller than a human, with sickle-shaped claws curving like blades, gleaming beneath the moonlight. Dakotaraptor, not as fast as Achororaptor, but bigger, stronger, and far more daring. It wasn't just a scavenger given the chance. It would kill the one who arrived first. The two small scavengers faced each other. Dakotaraptor let out a low, threatening hiss. Achororaptor immediately backed into the shadowed undergrowth, giving up the meal. Dakotaraptor approached the carcass, lowering its head cautiously. It checked the T.rex's footprints, sniffed the air, and determined no scent of the large predator nearby. The carcass's heat was dropping. Danger was low. Then it began tearing at the remaining scraps of flesh, small, but enough to feed it through the long night. As the Dakotaraptor fed, the forest began to stir again. Smaller, weaker creatures gathered at a safe distance. Feathered birds like Edmontosaurus perched on branches, waiting for leftover scraps. Lizards and small reptiles crept across roots in search of shed skin or loose fragments. Ancient mammal-like creatures sniffed beneath the leaf litter. An entire ecosystem encircled the dinosaur carcass, like rings of life revolving around a single point of death. All knew what the T.rex left behind was still enough to feed half the forest. The wind shifted. Dakotaraptor instantly stopped eating. Feathered birds burst upward in a flurry of wings. Achororaptor shot into a thicket like an arrow. No one saw anything. No one heard anything. But all of them sensed it. From afar came the faint compressing of soil, very soft, not strong enough to shake the ground, but enough to activate the instincts of every creature within hundreds of meters. A massive shadow emerged between the trees. Under the dim moonlight, its back formed a gigantic curve, and its two golden eyes flickered like twin flames. Another T.rex, not the hunter from earlier. A different individual, hungrier, bolder, or simply drawn by the scent of blood. Dakotaraptor stepped back, feathers bristling, but it didn't dare flee, not yet. Running now might trigger the T.rex's chase instinct. It waited, drew a slow, deep breath. Every muscle coiled tight. The newly arrived T.rex lowered its head to the carcass. It inhaled deeply and immediately recognized, this kill is not its own. Another T.rex had claimed this territory. But hunger is the strongest driver of instinct. It licked the remaining blood on the Edmontosaurus's flank. Its hot breath drifted across the ground, smoky in the moonlight. And at that moment, Dakotaraptor turned and sprinted away before it became too late. The T.rex only glanced at it, but that was enough. The smaller creature understood. Tonight was not the night to gamble with death. The second T.rex ate the last scraps of meat. Not much, but enough to quiet its hunger. It did not linger. After a few minutes, it left the area, fading into the black depths of the forest. Behind it, the hunting ground became the domain of the small creatures. Birds, lizards, rodent. Like mammals, insects, carrion, beetles, each took their share, gradually stripping the young Edmontosaurus's body until only bones remained. Those bones would whiten over the years, then be buried under mud, infused with minerals, and turned into fossils. Millions of years later, humans would discover them, but would never know the story you are telling today. Night had swallowed the forests of Laramidia. The wind grew colder, the air thickened, like condensed vapor trapped between the upright Araucaria trunks. The young moon hung suspended in the sky, its light spreading a thin, silvery veil across the ground. The T.rex, the one who had just enjoyed a full meal, slowly made its way toward higher ground. Its belly was full, heavy, and warm, making its steps deeper but lazier, not the exhaustion of a wounded creature, but the slowed, relaxed gait of an animal savoring a rare moment of fullness in this harsh world. Every footstep left a deep imprint in the soft soil, The night wind carried the scent of moss, mud, and something else. A scent that did not belong to it, not to the Edmontosaurus, not to the Dakota raptor. A heavy scent, sharp, raw flesh mixed with breath, hot like molten metal. The T.rex stopped. Its breath escaped as white mist. Its head tilted just a small motion, yet enough to make its entire 9-ton body narrow its focus like a spear point. It lowered its head slightly. Its nostrils widened. Something large was close. From a darkness thick as hanging mist, a massive shadow stepped out. First came the horn, nearly a meter long, curved and sharp like a blade. Then the great bony frill, as wide as the shield of an ancient warrior. Then the solid body, heavier even than the T.rex. An adult triceratops, a male, not a juvenile, not a weakling, a true warrior. The triceratops exhaled heavily, white waves of breath rolling from its wide nostrils. Mud clung to its face, and a crack in its left horn marked the aftermath of a recent battle. Its eyes held a hardened alertness, not fear, but warning. Triceratops did not hunt T.rex, but it did not hesitate to fight if threatened, especially if it believed its territory or herd was being encroached upon. The T.rex remained still. Its breathing slowed, its head lowered, not as preparation to strike, but to assess. This was an opponent even the apex predator would never underestimate. No roaring, no hissing, no sound of threat, only breath and the scent of two giants testing each other in silence. The T.rex stepped forward once. The Triceratops answered by tilting its head and lowering its two horns toward the front. In the darkness, that stance looked like two spears aimed straight at the T.rex's chest. The two creatures stood roughly 20 meters apart. The T.rex understood perfectly. A direct charge from the Triceratops could pierce its abdomen. A sweeping horn strike could break its leg or tear open the muscles of its hip. Either one could die in this fight. The night continued. The mist drifted slowly. The air between them thickened, as if time itself had stopped flowing. In nature, the strongest do not always choose violence, especially not after a full meal. Its instincts ran through its mind. It was full. It no longer needed to guard the carcass. Even a small wound could put it at a disadvantage for weeks. This male Triceratops carried no scent of young nearby, no calves, which meant there was nothing worth hunting. The T.rex tilted its head, its golden eyes fixed on the steel-sharp horns of its opponent. One wrong move, and its reign could end tonight. The Triceratops stomped its foot 3 times, dirt scattering beneath its weight. It was the final warning. Do not come closer. The T.rex inhaled deeply. Not in fear, not in weakness, but in pragmatism. It slowly stepped backward. The Triceratops did not move. It only watched. The T.rex took another step back, then turned left, circling past a large thicket without making direct eye contact, a behavior very typical of animals seeking to avoid conflict. No battle, no roar, no blood spilled, yet both understood. A single mistake. And tonight could have been the last night for either one. When the distance had widened to over 40 meters, the Triceratops finally lowered its head. It drew a deep breath, then turned toward the forest, where its herd might be resting under the canopy. It vanished into the darkness like a warrior who had just completed his duty of guarding his land. The T.rex stopped on a small rise. It watched, not out of hatred, but out of respect for a worthy adversary. Its breath remained steady, unpanicked, but its heartbeat just slightly had quickened. A dangerous encounter, a confrontation in which both knew, had they met on a different night, the outcome might have been very different. Darkness had settled fully over the Laramidian forest. The night wind was no longer gentle. It blew harder now, carrying the cold scent of soil and the gritty dust of shattered rocks along the forest's edge. The T.rex, the one that had just faced the Triceratops, stood atop the high mound. Its belly was still full and heavy from the great meal it had consumed, but that fullness no longer brought comfort. Instead, a vague unease slipped into its breath. The wind no longer sounded normal. There was another sound within it, low, deep, distant, yet unmistakably clear. Not a territorial roar, not the call of a scavenger, but the vibration of a massive vocal organ, a sound only one other creature in this land could produce. The call of another T.rex. Not a threat, not a warning, a declaration of territory. And it was not pleased that an intruder had stepped into its domain. The T.rex turned its head toward the sound. The muscles in its neck tightened. Its tail lowered to stabilize its stance, the posture of a creature ready to react. From within the darkness, a colossal figure emerged, stepping out of the forest like a living boulder dragging itself into the moonlight. Not much taller, but bulkier. A more hollowed belly, the mark of hunger. A long scar ran across its snout, down to the lower jaw. Its two golden eyes glowed like embers in the pale light. This was the T.rex that had lived here far longer, and it was not happy to find a stranger inside its territory. Distance between the two giants, 40 meters, close enough to smell each other, far enough to choose between war or withdrawal. The wind blew from the newcomer toward the resident. The intruder's scent filled its nostrils. The second T.rex released a deep, low rumble, not loud, not echoing, but it vibrated through the trees like falling stone. A T.rex didn't rely only on teeth to hunt. It used its roar to claim and defend land, much like lions today. The resident T.rex began to lift its head, open its jaws wide, vibrate the roof of its mouth. This roar rolled out like thunder across the plains. It wasn't meant to intimidate small predators. It was aimed squarely at the intruder, carrying a message as sharp as a blade. Leave, this is not your place. Our T.rex stood still. It was full. It had no desire to fight. But in the world of dinosaurs, intention mattered far less than movement. One wrong step, one misread gesture, and the battle would ignite instantly. The second T.rex stepped onto the mound. Its head lowered, its tail raised, its forelimb moved half a step forward, a sign of active threat. Not stay away, but I will attack if you do not leave. Ancient birds burst from the treetops in panic. The night suddenly tightened like a drawn bowstring. Our T.rex stepped back slightly, but as it did, its foot landed on a fallen branch. Crack, a tiny sound, but in such tension, it rang out like a bone snapping before war. The resident T.rex jerked its head upward. Its pupils shrank. The muscles along its jaw tightened. That was the trigger. In nature, war sometimes didn't begin because of territory, but because of one small sound at the wrong moment. The resident T.rex lunged forward. The charge was a blast of raw force, dirt exploding upward, wind splitting in violent bursts, the ground thundering beneath its weight. It opened its jaws, revealing rows of sickle-shaped killing teeth. Our T.rex dodged, left the instinct of a survivor who had escaped death once today, its reflexes sharpened by the earlier clash with the Triceratops. The two sets of jaws snapped against each other in mid-air, producing a resounding clack. Had that bite landed, its bones would have shattered. It retreated, but the other advanced relentlessly. This was nothing like the hunt for Edmontosaurus. T.rex hunted with patience, but T.rex fought with fury and absolute resolve. They slammed into each other like 200-ton boulders hurled from the heavens. The earth split beneath their feet. Saplings were ripped from the soil. The resident T.rex rammed into the left shoulder of the intruder. A crack rang out the shoulder bone, likely fractured. Our T.rex roared, a true roar this time, a sound like lightning rolling through its chest. It countered by striking at the opponent's neck, not deep, just grazing the thick hide, but enough to carve a long crimson mark. The other bellowed in rage. It swung its tail like an iron whip, slamming it into our T.rex's abdomen and sending it sliding sideways, nearly toppling. The two circled each other, two colossal silhouettes under the cold moonlight. Their breaths rose in clouds of steaming vapor. The metallic scent of blood spread across the night. This was no longer a fight for territory. This was a fight for survival. The resident T.rex prepared for a third charge, but as it turned its head, the moonlight fell upon its shoulder, the very spot that had just been bitten. A deep wound. Blood gushed freely. A sharp, piercing pain. It hesitated for just half a second. But in the world of dinosaurs, that half second stretched like an eternity. Our T.rex did not rush forward to attack. It stood still, and then something remarkable happened. The resident T.rex paused. The two faced each other, their breaths heavy, like wind whistling through a mountain pass. Then very slowly, the resident turned its head and stepped back into the shadows. Not defeated, not afraid, merely unwilling to risk its life, while its wound began to numb its leg. The sound of its footsteps faded away until only the wind remained. Our T.rex stood there, exhausted, yet alive. In this world, that alone was the greatest victory. The night remained deep. The moon drifted past layers of clouds, casting mottled patches of light over the uneven ground. The sounds of the forest returned gradually, as if nature needed a few minutes to ensure that the battle between the two beasts had truly ended. Our T.rex stood still atop the hill, its shadow long like a trembling stone pillar in the night wind. It was alive, but its body ached. Blood flowed from its left shoulder in a long streak, blending with the damp soil beneath its feet. The wound was not fatal, but deep enough to make its muscles ache with every movement. The nerves under its skin react to the cold wind. Its shoulder contract with each breath. Science shows that T.rex had a strong immune system and a fast bone-healing process, similar to many modern birds and reptiles. But in the first few hours, the pain was real. It lowered its head, lightly touching its nose to the wound, sniffing its own blood. The giant knew it was vulnerable. A smaller creature, if injured, would hide. But a wounded T.rex still had to move. It could not stay still, because the smell of blood would attract raptors. Another T.rex it had injured might return. Adult Triceratops or Ankylosaurus could see it as a weak threat and charge it. So, despite the pain, it began to walk. Each step left a bloody footprint. Each breath was a low growl from its throat. It chose to move north toward denser forest, where the wind was less strong and low shrubs could provide cover to rest without being easily spotted. As T.rex moved into the forest, the Araucaria canopy formed a natural roof, shielding the wound from moonlight. The light dimmed, the air softened, the sharp pain in its shoulder dulled. It stood under a large tree, its heavy body settling gently, tail resting on the ground, belly rising and falling with each breath. The forest now resembled an ancient cathedral, silent, vast, and solemn. A light breeze rustled the thin down on its neck, making it quiver slightly. T.rex did not lick its wound like a mammal, but it remained still to reduce blood loss, breathed deeply to regulate heart rate, minimized movement so muscles could contract and close the wound. It called no pack. It needed no help. T.rex lived alone, felt pain alone, and healed alone. Science indicates that T.rex's bones and tissues had rapid tissue regeneration thanks to a dense network of blood vessels. Fast clotting, reducing the risk of blood loss. Thick, layered skin, slowing infection. Lower inflammatory responses than mammals, limiting swelling and redness. In the next few hours, its body would form a clot on the surface, constrict blood vessels to reduce bleeding, mobilize white blood cells to fight bacteria, begin tissue regeneration. These processes occurred silently, unseen. Yet this secret allowed a nearly 9-ton creature to survive countless battles in its life. From afar, in the deep black forest, small eyes observed it. Perhaps an Chicxulub, perhaps a Dakotaraptor. They smelled the blood. They knew this giant was weak, but they did not dare approach. Even wounded, a T.rex remained a T.rex, an 8-ton bite force, hind legs like twin pillars, yellow eyes that could see through darkness, a tail strike capable of killing a smaller creature instantly. The Chicxulub dared only step slightly closer, then froze, blending into the ferns. It knew the line between life and death was just a few steps away. The wind ceased. The forest fell utterly silent. T.rex lowered its head, placing its snout on the damp earth. Its eyes blinked slowly, not from sleep, but from pain and fatigue. In this moment, it was not a destructive monster, not a king of the world, not a ruler. It was simply a creature trying to survive, feeling the ache radiate from shoulder to chest. Yet even in pain, it retained instinctive alertness. One ear pressed to the ground, sensing vibrations in the night, its nose inhaling slowly, controlling for strange scents, tail positioned to swivel quickly if needed. This was the instinct of a species evolved over millions of years to endure. The sky in the east began to turn pale blue. Dew clung to its thick skin like hundreds of tiny jewels. T.rex opened its eyes once more. Its body was cold, but the bleeding had stopped. The wound had scabbed over. The long night had passed. It was alive, and that meant one thing. Tomorrow, it would continue to rule, but to do so, it had to stand up, overcome the pain, and step into the light of a new day on the ancient land. Dawn in Laramidia never came quickly. It arrived by slowly opening a sliver of light on the horizon, slipping through the thin layers of clouds, then falling onto the Araucaria canopy like golden threads, gently rousing the forest from its nocturnal slumber. The T.rex, the survivor of the long night, opened its eyes as the first rays of light touched its eyelids, not because the light woke it, but because its body understood that the night had passed and the time to dominate the land had begun again. As it tried to lift its head, pain radiated from its left shoulder like a burning wave. Muscles twitched slightly, a natural reflex of damaged tissue. But the T.rex did not groan. It did not writhe. It did not pity itself. It rose by, pressing its hind legs firmly into the ground, lifting its hips first, shifting all weight to the right side, the uninjured side, finally raising its tail to maintain balance. Even though slow, the movement was powerful. The ground beneath its massive claws compressed forcefully, leaving deep impressions, like the touch of an ancient god. Light flooded the space, sweeping across dew-laden ferns, making them sparkle like thousands of tiny crystals. Ancient birds flew across the sky, their sharp calls announcing the beginning of morning. The T.rex inhaled deeply. The morning air was cold and damp, carrying the sense of wet earth, stone dust, araucaria, resin, distant herbivores moving about, and a faint trace of the T.rex it had encountered the night before. It stood still for a few seconds, sensing, analyzing, calculating. Its brain, larger than that of many other theropods, was active in the early hours of the day. The T.rex always processed information with the perfect instinct of a predator. Where food was, where threats were, where opportunity lay, where danger could come from. Normally, at dawn, the forest was filled with sounds. Edmontosaurus calling to its herd, Pachycephalosaurus bumping their heads against trees, ancient birds singing loudly, insects rustling, scavengers combing open spaces. But today, the forest was unusually silent. The T.rex understood why. Last night, two rulers had clashed. Roars, body collisions, and flying debris had alerted every creature within miles. Even without seeing them, it knew. Edmontosaurus had moved farther toward the swamp, Triceratops were gathering to defend. Scavengers had scattered because the scent of T.rex was too strong. Last night had not been just a battle. It had been an event that shifted the ecological rhythm of the entire region. The T.rex turned its head toward its left shoulder, trying to look. It could not see the full wound, but it could sense that. The blood had dried. A scab had formed. The shoulder muscles still hurt, but were not numb. There were no signs of infection. T.rex skin had multiple collagen layers, very thick, allowing it to withstand injuries without dying from infection, a trait that set it apart from modern mammals. It tested its shoulder with a small movement. Pain ran down its side, but it could still move. That meant it could still hunt, and if needed, still fight. The sun rose higher. A warm golden ray fell upon its body. The T.rex stood on the hill, looking down over the forest like a warrior who had survived the night's battle. Herbivores slowly reappeared. A few Edmontosaurus glimpsed behind the tree line. A herd of Pachycephalosaurus cautiously entered the open space. Some Ankylosaurus crossed the swamp, their clubbed tails swaying lightly with each step. All of them looked toward the T.rex, not with the raw fear of being hunted, but with respect and vigilance for the creature that maintained balance in the ecosystem. In nature, there were rare moments when every species understood its place, and that moment was happening now. The wind blew over the T.rex's body. Its thick skin and thin down began to warm under the sun. The pain remained, but that pain only made it stronger. The sky brightened. Birdsong returned. The forest awoke, and amidst it all, the T.rex, the ruler, stood tall like a living monument. It roared, not the roar of a threatening night, not the roar of war, but a roar of reclamation. A sound rolling far like thunder. Herbivores immediately stepped back. The forest trembled for a fleeting second. In that moment, the king of Laramidia's forests, wounded, having endured a long night of blood and fear, had returned to its throne. The sun gradually sank toward the west, leaving the sky painted in a streak of orange and purple stretching all the way to the distant mountains. Evening mist began to rise like a thin veil covering the ground of Laramidia, softening everything, slowing it down, as if nature itself wished to rest after a long day of turmoil. The T.rex stood atop the hill, looking down at the forest that had returned to peace. The pain in its left shoulder still flared with each vigorous movement, but that pain was only a small part of a massive body that had survived countless battles over its lifetime. The scent of blood on its body had faded. The smell of mud, resin, and night wind gradually took its place. These familiar signs told the world that the ruler had returned to normal. No need to roar anymore. No need to fight anymore. No need to hunt anymore. At least, not today. The T.rex slowly descended to the lower ground, where it usually hid. The familiar path led past ancient Araucaria trunks, through ferns as tall as a human chest. Every tree, every stone, every mark on the ground bore the imprint of time, witnesses to its growth. A few ancient birds flew past its head, uttering small calls, not alarm calls, only signals that nature was returning to its everyday rhythm. The giant inhaled deeply, letting its breath fill its chest. The evening air was cooler, more comfortable, and especially safer without the scent of last night's rival lingering nearby. Within the dense forest, where ferns grew thick and the ground was soft like a natural mattress, the T.rex found the spot it usually used to rest. It was not a nest, not a cave, just a slightly sunken patch of earth, large enough to hold its 8-9-ton body, quiet enough to remain undisturbed. It lowered itself little by little, bending its hind legs, laying its tail to the side, gently lowering the left shoulder to avoid scraping the ground, resting its head on the soft leaves in front. A long, deep sigh escaped from its throat, not a sound of pain, not a sound of fatigue, but a sound of release, released from hunger, released from battle, released from a night full of lurking dangers. The forest had grown dark. A thin moon hung above, casting light over the T.rex's massive body, making its rugged skin gleam with soft silver. Night dew collected on its back, like tiny sparkling gems on rough stone. No creature dared come close. Dacotaraptors hid in the shadows. Achiroraptors stood far away, silent, watching with cautious respect. Even the herbivores understood. Tonight, it would not hunt. Time seemed to slow. The wind calmed. The insects' rustling became a steady lullaby, lulling every creature to sleep. And the T.rex, the one feared by the entire forest, now lay still, breathing evenly, a part of the ancient wilderness itself. A vast, ruthless, and fierce world. Yet it sometimes paused, granting a moment of peace to the one who ruled it. In that moment, the T.rex was not a monster, not a threat, not a storm. It was simply a creature exhausted after a full day living by its instincts. A creature in need of rest to continue surviving in this immense world. The wind whispered through the Araucaria canopy, sounding like an ancient lullaby. The T.rex blinked one last time. Its breathing slowed. Its heartbeat deepened, steady and strong. And in the sacred silence of the evening, within the ancient forest of Laramidia, the ruler drifted into sleep. No chaos, no war, no lurking darkness. Only the strongest worthy creature, resting in peace after a long day.